Today I'm going to show you how to tumble shapes like these in a vibratory tumbler. I'm using a Lotto tumbler, but you could use any vibratory tumbler. You don't want to use a rotary tumbler for this because rotary tumblers are really good at rounding off shapes and changing the shape of a rock. So this rock may have started out as a jagged rock, and by the time it gets done in my rotary tumbler, it's all rounded off. We want to retain the shapes of these, so a vibratory tumbler is the way to do that. You might notice that there's Sharpies on here from when I traced these out. That'll all get tumbled off, so I'm not worried about that. Alright, here we are at my sink. And if you're going to use a Lotto tumbler, it's really nice to have a couple accessories to go with it. This is just a piece of PVC pipe. It makes a really nice stand. Otherwise the Lotto falls over when you try to balance it on that. And then this is a canning funnel, which fits perfectly in the top of the Lotto. And I should mention I also have this little trap in the bottom of the sink, so if I drop any ceramics, that'll catch them. So the first thing we need to do is put some water in the tumbler. I'm just going to fill it right up. And then we're going to put in our rocks. So what I like to do when I'm doing shapes is put in a couple, and then I like to put in some regular rocks with them. And a couple of shapes. And some other rocks. I put the water in there to cushion them so they're not banging together in the bottom. I don't want any of them to get chipped, especially if they have like these kind of delicate antlers on here. And I'm going for about half full. So, I don't know if you can see, but I'm getting pretty close to half full there. It doesn't hurt to have some small pieces in there, so I'm going to take some of these smaller pieces and throw them in with it. It kind of acts like the ceramics do. And then I have ceramics of mixed sizes, large ones and small ones. These have been well used, so they go in next. These will all get mixed up, so it doesn't matter if the rocks are all on the bottom and the ceramics are on the top. Get a few more in there. All right, about like that. When you're using a Lotto, you want to have everything wet, but no standing water in there. So what I do at this point is put my hand over the top, and I let the water run out between my fingers. Try not to drop too many ceramics in the sink. All right, so everything's wet, but there's no standing water in there. If you're not familiar with the Lotto, it needs to be mounted to a concrete block with the holes filled in. Some people will stack several blocks up high so they don't have to bend over. I didn't do that, but here we go. Here's our barrel, and then we just plug it in. And I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of 220 silicon carbide. Then the cap goes on. And I'll check this later on this evening before I go to bed, and then I check it about 3 times a day. Usually before bedtime, when I get up in the morning, and then when I get home from work again. Almost forgot to put the rubber band on. So you don't want this top falling off because everything will dry out. So I just string together some rubber bands and put it over top like that. It's a few hours later and it's about time for bed, so I'm going to take a look at this and see how it's coming along. That's looking really good. By morning, that's going to get kind of thick and the motion will slow down a lot, so I'm going to give it a little bit of water before I go to bed. That should hold it till morning. It's the next morning, and this is drying out quite a bit. As it's producing rock dust, that's soaking up the moisture, and you can see the movement slows down and everything's just sort of looking a little bit dry. So it needs some water. To stick together like this. That's why you want to put extra ceramics in there, so I try to separate those when I see them. Better to go slow than to add too much water. All right, that was pretty good. I'll check it later today again. This has been running for 2 days now, so it's time to do a clean out. First thing I'm going to do is add a little bit of dish detergent and water just to make it easier to rinse them off. I'm not measuring this, I'm just going until I kind of see everything slow down a little bit. So it's not rolling quite as fast now. Just give it a little squirt of dish detergent. This is Ajax, could be whatever, doesn't really matter. And then I'll come back in about 15 minutes and clean them out. Alright, these have been washing for about a half an hour. It doesn't take quite that long, but that's how long I let them run. I filled the barrel up with water. And I'm dumping them into my colander, and then I'm just going to rinse them with water a few times. All right, now these are going to go back into the barrel with a tablespoon of borax, and I'm going to run them for another hour or so, and then I'll rinse them again, and then they'll go on to the next stage. Now I'm going to add borax. Borax is a laundry additive, so you can find it in the laundry section of the supermarket. And I'm going to add a little bit of water again. And then these are going to rinse for about an hour. I'm adding this until stuff slows down like before. And so the idea here is to clean the rocks really well so you don't accidentally move grit from one stage to the next. I just got done rinsing the rocks, and they're wet, but there's no standing water. I drained all the water out like the first time. So now I'm going to add a tablespoon of borax. And then this time I'm using 500 grit aluminum oxide, and we only need a half teaspoon. And we'll let this run for 3 days, and I won't have to check on it as much as I did before because this won't produce as much rock dust, and therefore it won't dry out as much. These just came out of 500 grit after 3 days, and I thought I'd show you how they're coming along. Those are wet. These are not wet. These are completely dry, and I just thought I'd show you the shine that's coming out on these. There's my light bulb. They've got a really good shine, but they're going to go in for 2 more days in polish, and they should get just a little bit shinier. I did have a casualty after the 220 grit. This guy lost a horn, so I pulled him out after 220, but it gives me a good opportunity to show you the difference between 220 and 500. So these all go back in for 2 more days in polish, and then they'll be done. So for the polish stage, we use aluminum oxide polish, and this works exactly like the 500 grit stage. We use a half teaspoon of the polish and 1 tablespoon of borax, and I'm going to run it for 2 days. And they're finished. So these rocks have been in the tumbler for a total of 7 days. The last 2 days they've been in the polish stage, and after I rinsed them from the polish stage, I put them back in the tumbler for an hour with a tablespoon of borax and a little extra water. Same as I did in between stages. I rinse them off nicely that way. Most people call that a burnish stage, and that's not going to put any more shine on the rock. It just gets everything cleaned out really nicely. So if there's some grit stuck in nooks and crannies, it gets washed out. So here's one of the deer heads, and you can see it's got a nice shine to it. Here's another one of the deer heads. So this is a mixed batch of rocks that I got from Lake Superior. So anytime you do something like unakite, you're going to get a nice shine on it. So that looks really good. But I also have some rocks in here like this one. I've got to remember not to put that kind of rock back in again because that didn't turn out good at all. So you can see it's all pitted and undercut, and you just try some rocks. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. And I need to show you the casualties. This guy made it up until the burnish stage, and then he decided to shed his antlers. So that's a little disappointing. Made it all the way through until the very end. And you've already seen this one. I did find the tip of his antler, which is nicely shined up, and the rest of them's kind of dull. So this went through 220 and this went through all the stages. So I've done 6 of these deer heads now. There were 4 in this batch, 2 made it and 2 didn't, and I had 2 that I'd done previously that I didn't have any problems with. So I guess the moral of the story is stick with rocks like, or shapes like bears. Bears don't break, turtles don't break. If you get some really thin things on there, you do run the risk of breaking them, so it's okay. I've still got 2 that made it. I thought I'd show you a comparison between before and after. So these are different kinds of rocks. They're both green, but they're different kinds of rocks. So before, you've got sharp edges, really rough around the outside, and once you get them polished up, you've got little rounded off edges, not too rounded off, but just nicely, and shiny on the sides. So I guess that's it, and I'll see you next time.